Welcome to a bonus edition of Deep Look. I'm Charlie Eisenhood, the host and the editor. Joining me, Ultiworld Senior Editor Keith Raynor. And yeah, we're back again this week, Keith, because we totally failed and forgot to make our preseason picks for the Premier Ultimate League. And it starts this weekend.
Snuck up on us, I guess, with all the stuff going on. I mean, we've been talking about it coming, but it just all of a sudden is like, it's Premier Ultimate League is kicking off too.
So the season begins Sunday, April 2nd, and the Columbus Pride will be taking on the Raleigh Radiants in North Carolina. Portland Rising taking on the Austin Torch. Home team certainly going to be the favorite in Raleigh. And I'm not sure. That Portland-Austin game, what do you think there, Keith? Feels kind of like a coin flippy game because Portland will be on the road.
I agree. I don't exactly know what home field advantage is in the league, like how much it's worth. But I do feel like these teams are fairly comparable. And in a neutral site, I would favor Portland. But with the road travel, especially given that it's like basically as far as Portland could go and still be in the league, it does feel like it kind of evens it out. So that's a very compelling opener.
Yeah, so those are the games to get things going. We've already talked a little bit, Keith, kind of about the teams. We've seen the rosters. We talked about the roster drops. Once you've had a chance to really sit down and digest, where do you fall? Who you is the preseason number one? This isn't necessarily who you're going to pick to win, but just like who do you think it should be going into the year? Is it Raleigh? Is it New York? Is it DC? Or do you go in another direction and maybe say Minnesota or even potentially Philadelphia? I mean, there are 5 really good teams this year.
I agree with the 5 really good teams. I do think, though, that those first 3 that you mentioned are the teams that I'm putting in tier 1 to start the year. Raleigh, New York, and DC. Obviously you got a DC team that was in the final last year, so perfectly reasonable to think that they have the ability to challenge again. You've got a Raleigh team that made the championship weekend for last year as well, have a great talented background. And then you have a New York team that's kind of the buzzy team. They were disappointing last year, but big additions. You could say the same thing about Minnesota, but they didn't have the same talent base, I think, to work off of last year. They had a pretty mixed performance last season. So that's why I'm keeping them a tier below in tier 2. That's where I'm going to put Minnesota. And, maybe there's part of me that almost thinks like Raleigh could be in that area, but it's close. And Rising also could be in that tier 2 with Philly. Philly, it's an interesting situation for Philly because they are a new team, right? They're going to be going through this process for the first time. And having been there for the first season of AUDL with a brand new team, I saw firsthand how you're really learning on the fly, what it's like to sub under the new rules, what it's like to deal with travel, how you game plan, what availability is going to be like. I mean, it's really out there to do it myself. And so I imagine that they're going to be going through some of the same things, but a lot of their top players have already played in the league before, and that's going to smooth that transition out a bit. And that should definitely help Philly hit the ground running a little bit more than you might expect. And they're certainly talented. But to me, I'm looking at the top 3, DC, New York, and Raleigh. And while there's a case for all 3, I also think there's a reasonable case against each of them. I came into the year pretty hyped on Raleigh, thinking, hey, this is we know what they're about. They're well established. We have a sense. But the more I looked at their roster, the more I was like, man, there's a lot of turnover here. They have basically half the roster is in their first season in the PUL. They have a couple of players coming back who played 2 years ago but didn't play last year. They have Chyna Tickhome, who doesn't really count as a rookie. She's already played in the Western Ultimate League. She's also a really experienced player. But then it's a lot of players who are going to be making their debuts in the league, and they're doing it in place of players from Phoenix and Radiance who gave that team a lot of chemistry and continuity. So when you look at it, it goes beyond just the stars. You can talk about, still no Lindsey Sue. They're losing Ellie Youngst, Karen Earhart. But you go down the line, Lila Stanlin, Lyra Olsen, Maya Powell, Audrey Lyman was big for them last year. Katie Backus. I'm not sure what's causing the Phoenix kind of leaving the team, but between that and an entirely new coaching staff, I'm kind of concerned about where Raleigh's going to be at. They're bringing in a group that is not nearly as seasoned. Very few of their new players are players we've seen get that experience with Phoenix that would carry over here, that big game, playing in club semifinals, playing in worlds, all the stuff Phoenix has done to help these players build those experience level. That's not necessarily present in their incoming class. So yeah, there are a couple veterans like Christine Bookout and Jenna Dahl coming in, but this is going to be a really young team that doesn't have all the background that I think you would expect the Radiants to have. And so I'm a bit concerned about where they're at. I can no longer have them as the favorite coming into the year.
All right. Well, you gave us the bear case on Raleigh. I will give you the bull case because I think,
and I didn't even talk about Sarah Beckstraw.
Yeah. Well, losing Mex is tough, but here's the thing. Obviously they were one of the best teams in the league last year, but they got stomped by Revo. Now I know Revo's out of the league, but I just feel like it's not like last year's team was some total crazy juggernaut. Now, yes, I think you make the case they lose a lot of good players, but look at the roster and some of the young players that we're talking about. Alex Barnett, Ashley Powell, Bridget Meisner, Claire Revere, Dawn Colton, Erica Birdsong. I can continue down the roster and I can give you lots of names. Now, here's the thing. Are they as deep as they were? I think they're definitely not as deep as they were, but they have a lot of really good players. And yes, many of those players I just named are on the young side, but they're also very talented club players who are experienced playing at the highest levels of either college or club, because there's a lot of UNC Pleiades players on this roster. I just feel like it's not like I look around the league and I see a team that is clearly vastly superior in the talent department than them. Maybe there's more experience on other teams, but how much is that really valuable? I think it's possible that, if you had players who weren't maybe as committed as they needed to be last year, they leave. Now you have younger players come in, more committed. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but we have seen it many times before in the pro leagues. It's not just about, do you have the names? It's also about, do you care? Do you show up? Do you go to games? Remains to be seen with this Raleigh team, but I think the New York roster at this point does look stronger, right? Just on paper. But I also thought New York's roster looked great last year, and they were not very good. So I think that there is still chemistry gains in this Raleigh team, because even if the players haven't played PUL, they've played together in various capacities in the area. And that's not as true for a team like New York that has plenty of players from New York City proper who played bent or whatnot, but also has a mishmash of players from all over the New York to Boston, metro area. So I think my personal pick right now for preseason favorite, I do have to go Gridlock, but I don't think Raleigh, you almost said they were in tier 2. I do not agree. I think this is still a tier 1 team.
I'm also going to take New York as my favorite. I'm going to put New York, and then I have trouble deciding between Raleigh and DC. I really think I might go with DC as the number 2 team. Looking at the rosters, DC definitely lost some really key players, but I think that they had a stronger class of pickups with the players that they have. They have Jenny Faye coming back. And there's a lot of consistency. They're adding Margaret Walker as well. So DC. I think the DC Raleigh thing can be also construed as pretty close. So I think I'd take DC 2 and put Raleigh 3. But I have the misgivings about New York that we had last year. It's like, why isn't this team better last year? And so that's a little bit concerning. There's the talent though is just it's so high that I feel like that's going to energize. It's going to get that buy-in that you're talking about, right? You're talking about who shows up to games, who comes on the road. Well, I think when you get a chance to play with Yina Cartagena, you're going to say, oh, I might reschedule that other thing I was going to do. Maybe I'm going on this road trip,
It's a good point.
So I think that's going to be attractive to players. It's going to help the buy-in. Also, just the hype when the team's like, hey, we can go out and win the league this year. That's going to drive the buy-in. So I'm signing up with Gridlock as my number one title favorite.
I harbor some concerns about back end of New York's roster. I do think that the top end has clearly improved. I mean, there's just, at the end of the day, they're adding two elite World Games level players in Elizabeth Mosquera and Gina Cartagena. Like, we're talking about maybe both top 5 players on earth. Now, Mosquera is still maybe not quite, from what we saw at World Games, she wasn't back to the level that she had been playing at before her ACL injury last PUL season. So there's still a question mark there, but I think that once she gets going to fully back into the swing of things, she's going to be unstoppable, and she's going to be the best puller in the league, and there's not even a question about it. You look at the top 14, I feel great. After that, does the depth a problem? I don't know. Looking around the league, it's not like I see another team where I'm like, wow, that team is super deep. I don't see it with the Surge. I don't really see it with Minnesota. I certainly don't see it with Raleigh. Let me look at this DC roster one more time, but I think down the roster, it's not that big of a deal in pro. And it's one thing if we had a team in the league that was super, super deep all the way down, but I'm not sure I see that. I think DC probably the deepest team though.
That's fair, but I don't think it's somebody has a big advantage in that area. I don't think there's some team that has it as their superpower that, hey, we're really deep. I think there's a bunch of teams that have pretty similar benches that could play better than one another on a given night.
I agree.
Well, just before we go to the picks, just because they're new, like Philly Surge, do they have a real shot here? Like you look at the team, you think about the roster they have. They've got Linda Morse, they've got Raha, they've got Lindsay McKenna.
Yes,
they've got Andrea DeSabato. There's certainly talent on this team. Can they pull it off in their first year?
I think they're capable. I think they have the benefit of having some very experienced top-level elite players who know to take a championship. Largely that's coming with Philadelphia Amp in the mixed division. My concern about Surge is that they're a little too old. Like, some of their best players are on the tail end of their careers. And I would probably rather take Raleigh, thinking about all of the youth and speed and just sort of like new age game that they're going to play, compared to this Surge roster where there's a bunch of players who are, getting towards the end of their careers. Now, the thing is, the window is open, but maybe just like right now. I don't see a very obvious future without like bringing in players from outside Philadelphia where I'm like, oh yeah, Philly Surge is going to win a title in 3 years. No, I think this is the championship window. Like, it's weird to say that it's in their first season, but like they probably have a couple of years and then the window starts to close. I do think they could. I think there's enough good players on this team that they could challenge. But it's hard to come out year one and pull that all off.
I think I agree. I think that there's enough uncertainty that the door is open, but it feels unlikely to me that there's a lot of obstacles, and just adding on at your first year can just be the straw that breaks the camel's back here.
But we also, we got to say it, we don't necessarily know what a really top-end Philadelphia women's roster looks like. You can say, oh, well, Green Means Go went to nationals. Yeah. But we haven't seen all of the top women in Philly play together outside of like one-off tournaments. So what is it going to look like? Maybe we're going to be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
I'm high on the Surge team, probably higher than the average person. I mean, I picked them in my bold predictions to win the league, Keith.
Yeah, I get it.
All right, let's go division by division. Who's making the playoffs? You got to pick the division winner, and then we got to pick a wild card. So who's making the championship weekend?
All right. Well, let's start in the South, because I feel like that's the chalkiest, easiest take. Although I will say, over on our sister podcast, Double Overtime, there's some Austin Torch hype over there. I believe that Sasha Vogel did call for the Torch to win the South. So
to win the South,
a bold call. They have a tough schedule. They travel to New York and Philly in a back-to-back. That's gonna be tough for them. But maybe they can pull it off. I'm trying to see if they play Raleigh in Austin.
How many games they got against Raleigh? Yeah, how many games they got against Raleigh? Just the one?
Just the one, and I'm trying to see where that is. Raleigh's at Nashville. They play in Raleigh. Yeah, I can't get with that. I'm taking Raleigh. They play the best team in their division in Raleigh. Yeah, I'm going to take Raleigh to win the South.
Scheduling's too brutal for them. I mean, if they want to have a chance, they must win this opening weekend game against Portland. Absolute must win at home. They only play 6 games.
Yeah, that is a tough spot to be in. But put the pressure on right away. Every game matters, which is at least exciting.
Suffice it to say, I'm also taking Raleigh here. Just too much talent. None of these other rosters look dangerous enough. Maybe if I squint, I could see Austin, but not with the schedule they have.
The Central, I actually feel like lines up pretty similarly. I think the striker going to be vastly better than the rest of the division. I think they'll maybe play a close game somewhere in there against their divisional foes. But Indy plays at Minnesota in week 5. I think Indy is probably going to be the second best team in that region, maybe or in that division. Maybe it'll be Milwaukee still. Columbus is looks sparse, their roster. So I'm going to take the chalk and take Minnesota to win the Central as well. Who's a bigger favorite, Minnesota or Raleigh?
I think it's a laugher. I think strike win going away.
Sounds like you. Yeah. Okay. I'm in the same camp, but I do think that Indy is going to be solid. I think they're going to not look like a basement team. They had a solid record last year. I think that they will show a couple things. They're not going to be in Minnesota's league though, I don't think. All right, let's get to the tough stuff then. What everybody wants to talk about. The East. We've basically established what we think is going to now we're considering schedule a little bit. And yeah, New York goes at Minnesota in one of their out of region games or out of division games. That's a tough draw, but they get DC in New York. They travel to Philly. They get Portland in New York. I mean, I feel like the schedule is mostly favorable for the gridlock. So I'm going to take the gridlock to win the East, both on talent and I think a solid schedule. It's
worth noting that the Portland game at New York is going to be played in Amherst, Massachusetts.
Okay, that's fair. I forgot about that, actually.
I don't know whether you want... I mean, I almost feel like that's more Portland turf than New York turf. It's kind of equidistant. But that's the Northeast. That is not New York.
That's fair. But
it's kind of a weird thing. I mean, I don't know how that came to pass, but the gridlock, opted to do that. The game will be held during Amherst Invite. That'll be cool. So hopefully a bunch of the high school kids come out to the game.
I wouldn't be shocked if the high school kids are rooting for Gina Cartagena and Elizabeth Mosqueda.
Fair point. I think, I have to say, I'm pretty sure that the wildcard team will come out of this division. I think we're going to get 2 teams out of the East. And it's really I mean, it's going to be brutal. Like every single one of those games is going to feel like it's kind of must watch. I think Portland is the odd team out, but Philly, DC, New York all feel like must feel like they have a chance. At the end of the day, I'm taking New York to win the division. As much I feel like I get to hold on to the bold prediction in my heart, but when I really sit down and I look at the rosters, I think I got to take DC, Keith. There's not enough playoff spots. Like Philly might be the 3rd best team in the league, and they're not going to make the playoff spot. I don't think. I think it's going to be DC and New York.
I think I'm in the same boat. Philly does not have a particularly favorable schedule. You look at who they play out of division. They play Raleigh. They play Austin. Those are tough matchups. They also play at DC when those 2 teams meet. So that's not helpful if you think that we might get into a head-to-head with them in DC. DC plays Indy and Milwaukee and Raleigh, so you get to swap the torch for the Indy Milwaukee or whatnot. Like that seems a lot better to me for your schedule. So yeah, they also play they play Portland twice. I think Philly and Portland play twice. So I don't know how that'll impact things on the whole, but worth noting that they do have a double division matchup there.
Well, just consider this. That next weekend, not this coming weekend, but the following, it's New York at Philly. And that's basically the first big game of the year. And that is going to be must watch. Must watch. Because
if Philly comes out and wins that, it changes everything.
Even though New York's going to be the favorite, Philly playing at home, how many be at that game? Over under 1,200 people, Keith. I'm not even kidding.
It's also, I think, an off weekend for college. There'll be no college ultimate. So all the coaches and players that might be able to come, yeah, and Philly opener, it definitely could hit the over there. I feel like the over. There's gonna be a lot of hype.
You love the chances for Philly to get us through a strong start and get the upset win over New York.
Really, if they win, the 538 projections for the playoffs shift dramatically.
I mean, every game is going to be that way this season. If there's something that's nice about a really, really short schedule, it's that every game has massive implications, especially in a division like the East.
Let's hope that none of it gets ruined by the kind of weather that all this college ultimate's about to take place in. I'm tired of this.
Oh no! Don't talk about it. Okay, it's we agree on the teams going to the Final Four.
No,
yeah, you're not taking Philly either. Oh my gosh, I want to take Philly so bad.
The sweep is not indicative of how close of a call I think it is. The fact that we're both picking the same teams, it does not mean like we think Philly's like a mega dog or anything. I think that they're right there. We're just both feel good about it.
Keith, can you quickly tell me who Minnesota's playing out of conference?
Yeah, Minnesota out of conference. They play Atlanta, Nashville, and New York. And they're playing.
Oh, that Minnesota-New York game is going to be a good one. That might be for the 1 seed.
Yeah, that should be good. That's in Minnesota.
Ooh, wow, fun one. New York has some really tough road games. I think that's going to be for the 1 seed. I think Minnesota's got a really good chance to get the 1 seed. But I'm not going to try to speculate too much on which teams are going to play who in the Final Four. It's going to come down to the algorithm, probably something tricky. So going to the finals, I'm going to take New York and Raleigh. And I'm taking New York to win it all.
All right. I'm also taking New York to advance to the final. I'm gonna go with Minnesota. I think that we have a good history of their being upsets at championship weekend. That the team that you preseason expected to be there doesn't always get there, and having a talented pairing that's playing well. I seem to remember Robin Fettig helping drive Atlanta to their shock performance in the inaugural season. So, hey, I like the idea. And I think they have actually a pretty solid roster behind them. I think it's easy to get, starry-eyed looking at the team. But when you're asking the players who might have been like the frontline players to now be the, support, that's a huge bonus. And they picked up some nice pieces to go with that. So Minnesota with the shocker, I think, in the end of the year. And I'm not going to take them to shock the world and get the win. I'm going to take New York to finish it off and to keep the rings piling up for Cartagena and Mosqueda.
Well, it should be a fun season and great games to watch. Definitely circle that Philly-New York game weekend. That's going to be a great one. And so the PUL gets underway this weekend. Find out more information on our website. And thanks for bearing with us on this bonus episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Shoot us an email with your thoughts, deeplook@ultiworld.com. Hit us up at deeplookpod. Don't miss our sub-bonus segment this week, which is all about the college bid watch going into this final weekend. For Keith Raynor, I'm Charlie Eisenhood. It's so long. Talk to you next week on a presumably single episode of Deep Look. Talk to you then.